Hi, my name is Helen, and I'm going to be reviewing Chapter 13 of About Behaviorism by B.F. Skinner. The chapter is called What is Inside the Skin? Skinner begins the chapter stating that all humans are organisms, defined by the collection of their behavior responses and their history of reinforcement. Skinner states that behavior emitted by humans is also determined by the environment. This is supporting that operant conditioning is part of our genes that has developed through evolution as a species. Skinner contrasts the views of behaviorism and mentalism throughout the chapter. He provides examples and raises questions about the two opposing views in the context of understanding human behavior. Skinner notes that mentalistic explanatory fictions have failed throughout history to explain the problems in society. Skinner adds that behavior change, based in science, has made significant impacts on the problems faced by society, even though it's a relatively new framework. Looking at behavior through this lens, considering the impact of the environment, is relatively new and has shown significant impact because it does consider the environment, while the mentalistic explanatory fictions are based on feelings or things that we can't see within the skin. Skinner argues that behaviorism can be utilized to predict behavior by examining contingencies, while mentalism is unreliable and inaccurate. Skinner raises the question, of the two views, behaviorism and mentalism, which one is more effective in collaborating with other sciences? The rest of the chapter focuses on three main areas: psychology, physiology, and the nervous system, in the context of these two opposing views. Psychology is often defined as studying the mind, focusing on the under-the-skin events. Skinner argues that if the intention of psychology is to focus on the mentalistic, unmeasurable events, then it would not be considered a science technically. He discusses how psychology has also been defined to include the study of behavior in its definition, along with the internal events of the mind, which adds the scientific aspect of behaviorism. But still, the focus on beliefs and thoughts is based on opinion, which is a mentalistic characteristic which opposes the science. Skinner describes how ancient philosophers have attributed internal events to the major organs of the brain, lungs, and the heart. So pairing the internal events to the physiological body. He gives examples of mentalistic phrases that are still used today, such as describing a person as heartbroken when they lose someone they love. So that's relating an internal mental event to a physiological organ, the heart. Some other examples of these phrases that we still use today could be saying you're losing your mind when you're walking around your house looking for your cell phone when it's been in your hand the whole time. Or the phrase trusting your gut or intuition. When your stomach drops when a situation does not feel right, it could be explained with behaviorism. For example, if a friend tells you about finding text messages on their partner's phone that suggested infidelity, you may have learned from personal experience or the experience of others that finding these text messages have resulted in the consequence of infidelity. You may have learned that the texts relate to infidelity, a conditioned response that those actions make it more likely for the infidelity to happen in the future. The response may be aversive enough to evoke a physiological response of the pit of your stomach dropping because of your learning history of infidelity. Though Skinner disagrees with explanatory fictions of the past, he highlights that physiology will be the key to understanding internal events as technology continues to improve and progress. As technology begins to improve, that will be able to provide the scientific evidence to measure what we can't see, so proving the when and why of behavior responses in real time. The chapter ends with a comparison of self-observation, also known as introspection, and the nervous system. The nervous system is a sensory system made up of nerves all over the body that elicit responses to the environment. Observation of the self and reflecting on our internal events has limits because it is subjective in nature and the lack of the scientific evidence that can support our self-observations or our awareness that we have of ourselves. So, for example, as a yoga teacher, I've often used mentalism and explanatory fictions to explain physiological responses in the body and behavior. I have based my yoga practice on developing self-awareness and encourage others to listen to their body. So, asking students to focus their attention on their breath, the air moving in and out of the lungs, as well as the slowing down of the heartbeat while you're taking these low, slow, deep breaths. In reality, through the lens of behaviorism, we cannot listen to our body because we cannot see or hear what is truly going on inside without the scientific technology to measure these responses that are within the skin. So my discussion questions for this week has two parts. Skinner begins the chapter listing several internal characteristics through the lens of mentalism. This is in the very start of the chapter. He lists so many different of these characteristics that challenge our perception of humanity or how we relate to it. Personally, I've related or referenced most of these under the skin characteristics for my entire life, such as memories, beliefs, and compassion. So my question for this week's discussion is, what were some of the mentalistic characteristics that he listed that may have changed your perspective? And part two, how could you explain one of these characteristics to someone using behaviorism? So explaining any one of those characteristics that he listed through the lens of behaviorism rather than mentalism. So using our contingencies and our history of reinforcement to explain these phenomena. Okay, and part two. Skinner lists mental illness as a mentalistic characteristic, along with depression and anxiety. Mental illness awareness is a movement that is gaining popularity by promoting an open dialogue and communication, advocacy, and support to end the stigma associated with mental illness. Do you agree or disagree with Skinner? This is talking about the characteristic of mental illness as mentalistic. Do you agree or do you disagree? And how could you use a behavior analytic approach to advocate for mental health awareness while still applying the rules of behaviorism to explain something like this? And okay, that is the end of my presentation. This chapter definitely made me challenge a lot of my perceptions, like I said, that I have used for my whole life. So it's definitely been interesting for me to take a step back and think about things I've thought about my whole life and put into the context of the scientific behaviorist approach. So I'm looking forward to your responses and thank you so much for listening.